My name is Clara Whitmore, and I was 34 years old when I finally understood what it feels like to be someone's backup plan. I think deep down every woman knows when she's being kept, not cherished, not fully chosen, just stored somewhere safe in case life goes wrong. We feel it in the pauses, in the way compliments sound slightly off, in the way our presence is appreciated but never craved. We just convince ourselves not to look too closely because admitting that the man you love sees you as insurance instead of desire is a kind of heartbreak that dismantles your sense of worth. For 2 years, I was that woman for Wesley Caldwell. I was the stable one, the reliable one, the woman who paid the mortgage on a quiet 3-bedroom house in the suburbs, a house I bought with my savings long before Wesley ever moved in his clothes, his routines, and his entitlement. I was the woman who funded his reset months when he complained his tech job drained his creativity, the one who smiled while he booked spontaneous trips and called them self-discovery. Bali, Tulum, Costa Rica. I stayed home, held things together, and told myself love meant patience. I listened when he vented. I rubbed his shoulders after long days. I scheduled his car maintenance, stocked the fridge, remembered his parents' birthdays, and kept our life running smoothly enough that he could pretend chaos was behind him. I was stable, I was dependable, and according to Wesley, I was sweet. But I wasn't Vanessa. Vanessa was his ex-girlfriend, the woman before me. The myth, the ghost, the emotional blueprint I never asked for but was constantly compared to. According to the stories Wesley told early on, Vanessa was a disaster. Unemployed for long stretches, emotionally volatile, financially reckless, someone who borrowed money and never paid it back, who slammed doors, screamed during fights, and once punched a hole through drywall during an argument. But whenever he talked about her, his eyes didn't look angry. They looked alive. She just had this intensity, he'd say, staring off into nothing while I cooked dinner. Life with her was a roller coaster. It was toxic, sure, but the passion was insane. With me, everything was quiet. He said quiet the way someone says predictable, or worse, boring. I tried to compensate. I dressed up more, planned expensive dates, bought the watch he hinted at, tried to be spontaneous in ways that still felt safe. And every time I got the same response, a smile, a pat on the arm, like a reward given to a well-trained pet. "You're such a good provider," Wesley told me once, laughing like it was a compliment. Not lover, not partner, provider. The disrespect crept in slowly. Late-night phone calls taken in other rooms, jokes about my finance job being soul-crushing while he spent the money it funded, and the most telling detail of all, he never fully moved in. He slept at my house every night, ate my food, used my utilities, but he kept his tiny, overpriced apartment across town just in case. "I need to know I have an escape hatch," he said once casually. "It's a trauma response from Vanessa." Everything was about Vanessa. If I was 5 minutes late, I was disrespectful, just like her. If I was attentive, I was smothering, unlike her. I wasn't competing with a person, I was fighting a ghost. And I was losing. Still, I loved him. I believed peace would eventually feel better to him than chaos. I believed consistency would win over intensity. I was wrong. Last Sunday, we had dinner at his parents' house. Margaret and Thomas Caldwell, kind old-school people who adored me. They knew exactly how turbulent Wesley's 20s had been, and they looked at me like relief personified. We were eating roast chicken. Wine flowed easily. Thomas asked me about market trends. Margaret beamed at Wesley like he'd finally stabilized. Then the conversation shifted. "You two have been together 2 years now," Margaret said warmly. "We're just so happy, Wesley. You seem so grounded." Wesley stiffened beside me. "Grounded," he repeated flatly. Thomas chuckled. "Compared to everything with Vanessa, we were worried back then. That girl was a storm." The air changed. Wesley slammed his glass down, not hard enough to shatter, but enough to make the silverware jump. "Can we not talk about her like she was a monster?" he snapped. "She stole from us," Margaret said, confused. "She cheated on you." "She was misunderstood," Wesley shot back. "She was an artist. She had passion. She didn't care about 401ks and polite suburban conversations. She made me feel alive." I sat frozen, fork midair. "Wesley," I said quietly, "they're just paying us a compliment." He turned to me slowly. His eyes were glassy, his expression sharp with something cold and superior. "A compliment," he laughed. "They're complimenting you because you're safe, Clara. You're the woman men settle down with when they're tired of being hurt. But don't confuse safe with wanted." Then he leaned closer, smirking. "Let's be honest," he said loud enough to scar the room. "If Vanessa ever asked me back, I'd choose her. In a second." The silence that followed felt endless. And for the first time in 2 years, I felt nothing at all. I set my napkin down, stood up, thanked his parents for dinner, and walked out. I didn't look back. The drive home felt unreal, like I was moving through a tunnel where sound had been turned down deliberately. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't call anyone. I didn't replay the dinner in my head the way I normally would after a fight, dissecting every word, wondering what I could have said differently. There was nothing to analyze anymore. Wesley had said the quiet part out loud, and once that happens, there's no room left for confusion. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat about 10 minutes in his name, lighting up the screen. Once, then again, then again. I didn't answer. I didn't decline the calls either. I let them ring until the silence swallowed them whole. When I pulled into the driveway, I sat in the car longer than necessary, staring at the house. My house. The one I bought 3 years earlier before Wesley, before his half-packed drawers, and his emotional messes. The porch light was on, casting a soft glow across the steps, and for the first time in months, the sight of it didn't fill me with tension. The house wasn't bracing itself for anyone. It was just waiting. I walked inside, closed the door behind me, and stood in the entryway, breathing in the stillness. It didn't feel lonely. It felt clean. I didn't sit down. I didn't cry. I went straight to the kitchen, pulled open the cabinet under the sink, and took out a box of heavy-duty black trash bags, the kind you buy when you don't want anything tearing through. Then I went upstairs. I started with the closet. Wesley's clothes were still arranged the way I'd organized them, work shirts on one side, casual wear on the other, shoes lined up neatly at the bottom. I didn't hesitate. I took the first jacket off the hanger and folded it into a bag, then the next, and the next. There was no anger in my movements, no shaking hands. I wasn't throwing anything. I was methodical, almost gentle. The suits I bought him for events he complained about, the sweaters he left draped over chairs like he owned the place, all of it went into bags. In the bathroom, I cleared the counter inch by inch. His electric razor, his cologne, the products he never replaced because I always did. I wiped the surface clean when I was done, not out of spite, but because I wanted the space back. Downstairs, I packed his books, his laptop stand, the framed photo of us from a beach trip where I'd thought we looked happy. 45 minutes. That's all it took to erase his physical presence from my life. By the time I finished, there were 7 large black bags and 2 cardboard boxes stacked neatly by the front door. I didn't put them on the curb. I wasn't trying to punish him by ruining his things. I just didn't want them inside my home anymore. Then I did the most important part. I walked to the front door keypad and opened the app on my phone. Wesley Caldwell, active user. I pressed delete. The lock reset with a soft mechanical whir. I did the same for the back door. Then the garage. One by one, every access point he had quietly enjoyed, without ever earning, disappeared. I poured myself a glass of bourbon, the good bottle I'd been saving, and sat on the couch. My phone lit up like a siren. Missed calls. Texts. The tone shifted rapidly from fury to panic. "Clara, this isn't funny. My dad is driving me home. You better be there. I was drunk, okay? Stop being dramatic. We're 5 minutes away." I took a slow sip. The burn grounded me. Headlights swept across the living room window. Doors slammed outside. I recognized Thomas's voice, sharp and furious, but not directed at me. Then silence. Wesley must have seen the bags. The doorknob rattled. The keypad beeped rapidly. Then came the pounding. "Clara," he shouted, "open the door. This isn't funny." I didn't move. "You can't do this. I live here." He didn't. He never had. He'd made that clear every time he reminded me about his apartment, his escape hatch, his options. "Open the door or I'm calling the police," he yelled. I picked up my phone and typed one sentence. "You said you'd choose her. Go to her." I sent it. The shouting stopped abruptly. A heavy thud hit the door. Then his voice cracked into something desperate and ugly words, spilling out, meant to wound because that was all he had left. I listened without reacting as Thomas finally snapped, ordering him into the car, telling him this was his doing. I heard the bags dragged away. A car door slammed. The engine pulled out of the driveway. When the silence returned, it was absolute. I finished my drink slowly, sitting alone in a house that finally belonged entirely to me. And for the first time in a very long time, the quiet didn't feel like something I had to fill. I slept deeper that night than I had in months. The kind of sleep that feels heavy and dreamless, like your body finally believes it's safe enough to shut down completely. When I woke up, the sun was already high, pouring through the bedroom windows in a way that made the room look unfamiliar, brighter than it used to. For a split second, I reached for my phone out of habit, expecting the usual morning anxiety messages to answer emotional fires, to put out apologies to draft in my head. Then I remembered. There was nothing to fix anymore. My phone told a different story. Dozens of notifications crowded the screen, Wesley's name stacked over and over until it blurred. Sometime around 3 in the morning, his tone had shifted again. Anger had burned itself out, replaced by bargaining, the last refuge of someone who realizes they've lost control. "Can we just talk, please, Clara? You're really throwing away 2 years over one sentence, I miss you." I read them without flinching. 2 years. He kept framing it like I was the one ending something valuable, like the sentence he'd thrown at me wasn't the final confession of a truth he'd been living by all along. Then came the messages from other people. Friends I hadn't spoken to in months suddenly found my number again, sliding into the role Wesley had assigned them. Concerned voices, gentle pressure, thinly veiled guilt. Jessica. "Hey, Clara, Wesley's a mess. He didn't mean what he said. Locking him out was kind of extreme, don't you think, Ryan? You know how he gets when he drinks. Just hear him out. Lena. He says you blindsided him, that he never thought you'd actually leave." I didn't respond to any of them. I didn't block them either. I just let the messages sit there, unread receipts, glowing like quiet witnesses. It was fascinating how quickly the narrative flipped. In his version of events, I was the cold one, the woman who snapped without warning and threw a man onto the street. Context evaporated the moment it stopped serving him. Around 10 that morning, my phone buzzed again, this time with a name I hadn't expected. Margaret Caldwell. My chest tightened slightly as I opened the message. "Clara. I am so incredibly sorry. Thomas and I are mortified. We told Wesley he is not welcome back here until he takes responsibility for his behavior. We love you, and whatever you decide, we understand." I stared at the words longer than necessary. That message held more accountability than I'd gotten from Wesley in 2 years. It was the only one I answered. Thank you, Margaret. I appreciate you and Thomas, but I'm done. I spent that weekend doing small, quiet things that felt strangely rebellious. I went to the gym without checking my phone between sets. I ordered the pizza I liked, not the gluten-free version Wesley insisted on because it made him feel healthier. I watched a movie on the couch without someone scrolling loudly beside me, half listening, half dismissing everything I enjoyed. I kept expecting him to show up again to bang on the door or make a scene, but he didn't. By Monday, I was back at work. By Wednesday, the silence from him shifted again, this time publicly. A mutual friend sent me a screenshot without comment. Wesley had posted an old photo on Instagram. Grainy, dark. Him and Vanessa, from years ago, cigarettes in hand, looking reckless and romantic in that performative way people mistake for depth. The caption read, "Sometimes you have to go back to the source to find your fire again." I stared at it for a long moment, waiting for the jealousy to hit, for the familiar ache in my chest. It never came. All I felt was relief. He was someone else's responsibility now. It took exactly 3 weeks for the fantasy to collapse. I didn't go looking for the details, but in a town our size, stories travel fast. Eventually, the truth found me anyway, delivered over a beer by Ryan, the same friend who'd defended Wesley at first, now shaking his head in disbelief. "He really went back to her," Ryan said, like immediately. I nodded unsurprised. "She expected some big reunion," he continued. "Instead, she got reality. She's unemployed, Clara, still. Living in a basement apartment with 2 roommates. He asked her for money on the second day." I took a sip of my drink, letting the information settle without emotion. "It got worse," Ryan added quietly. "He kicked her out after a fight, middle of the night. She called me crying. She has nowhere to go." He hesitated. "She wants to talk to you." I met his eyes calmly. "No." He didn't argue. I went home that night, unlocked the door to my quiet house, and realized something important had shifted. The guilt was gone. The second-guessing had faded. Whatever storm Wesley had chosen, it no longer belonged to me. Once the story of Wesley and Vanessa reached its inevitable end, it stopped being gossip and started sounding like a cautionary tale one people told with lowered voices, as if saying it too loudly might invite the same chaos into their own lives. I didn't ask for updates, but they came anyway, slipping into conversations like afterthoughts. Someone would mention her name, then glance at me, gauging whether I still flinched. I never did. That seemed to unsettle them more than anger ever could have. What struck me most was how predictable everything sounded. Wesley had gone back to Vanessa chasing a feeling, not a future. He wanted intensity without responsibility, passion without consequence. According to Ryan, the reunion lasted exactly long enough for fantasy to burn off and leave nothing but ash behind. Vanessa didn't want a partner. She wanted admiration, financial support, and someone to orbit her instability without questioning it. Wesley, it turned out, was only exciting to her when he was unavailable and idealized from a distance. Reality made him small. He borrowed money almost immediately. When that ran out, he borrowed patience. When that failed, he borrowed blame. He accused her of being boring, of changing, of trying to control him. Echoes of the same complaints he'd once made about me repackaged for a new audience. The difference was that Vanessa didn't absorb the damage quietly. She fought back loudly and destructively until there was nothing left but exhaustion. The night it finally imploded, Wesley was thrown out of her apartment after midnight. According to the story, he stood on the sidewalk with a backpack and nowhere to go, calling people he hadn't spoken to in years. I wasn't one of them. He didn't try. Maybe part of him knew that whatever door I'd closed wasn't meant to be reopened. For a brief moment, I wondered if I should feel vindicated. After all, this was exactly what I'd tried to warn him about, exactly what he'd chosen over me. But vindication requires emotional investment, and by then, I simply didn't have it anymore. His disappointment belonged to him. His lessons were his to learn. Weeks passed. My life expanded in small, almost imperceptible ways. I stayed late at work without guilt, took on a project I'd previously avoided because Wesley thought ambition was stressful energy. I slept better. I laughed more easily. Friends commented that I looked lighter, like someone had quietly removed a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying. Then 6 months after that dinner, I met Daniel Harper. It wasn't dramatic. There was no spark that knocked the air out of my lungs, no immediate sense of danger disguised as attraction. We met through mutual friends at a casual get-together, talked about books, work, and the worst movies we'd ever seen. He listened when I spoke and didn't interrupt to steer the conversation back to himself. When he asked me out, it felt simple, unforced. Dating Daniel was calm. But this time, calm didn't feel like settling. It felt like respect. I hadn't heard from Wesley in months when the wedding invitation arrived, a mutual friend I couldn't reasonably avoid. I hesitated for exactly one evening before deciding to go. Not because I wanted closure and not because I wanted to prove anything, but because my life no longer revolved around managing his potential reactions. Daniel offered to come with me, not as a shield, but as a partner. I said yes. I saw Wesley across the reception hall before he saw me. He looked thinner, but not healthier. His posture had collapsed inward like someone bracing for constant impact. When his eyes finally landed on me, then shifted to Daniel's hand, resting comfortably at my back, something in his expression fractured. He walked toward us slowly like someone approaching a door they already knew was locked. "Claire," he said, voice rough. "Wesley," I replied, neutral and polite. He glanced at Daniel, then back at me. "Can we talk just for a minute?" I searched myself for hesitation and found none. "There's nothing to say." His face crumpled, desperation breaking through the carefully practiced regret. "I made a mistake," he said. I panicked. "Vanessa was nothing. You were everything." I stepped back just enough to make the boundary clear. "No," I said softly. "You wanted me when you needed safety. You wanted her when you wanted chaos. I'm not a waiting room anymore." He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. For the first time, he truly understood that the option he'd taken for granted no longer existed. I turned back to Daniel, took his hand, and walked away without looking back. On the dance floor, the music swelled, the lights softened, and I realized something profound. I wasn't wondering if I was enough anymore. I already knew I was. There's a strange peace that comes after the moment you realize someone no longer has power over you. It isn't loud. It doesn't arrive with fireworks or dramatic speeches. It settles in quietly like a room finally returning to its natural temperature after years of being too hot or too cold. Walking away from Wesley on that dance floor felt exactly like that. Not victorious, not bitter, just finished. The rest of the wedding passed without incident. I danced with Daniel, laughed with friends, and for the first time at a social event in years, I wasn't scanning the room, bracing for an emotional ambush. Wesley stayed near the bar, nursing drink after drink, watching from a distance like someone observing a life they no longer recognized as theirs. At one point, our eyes met across the room. I didn't look away. I also didn't soften. I simply nodded once, a gesture that said everything I needed it to. I see you. I'm not coming back. Daniel noticed, of course. He always noticed things like that. Are you okay? He asked later, his voice low and steady. I smiled genuinely. I am. I really am. That's when I knew the difference between safety that cages you and safety that supports you. With Wesley, I had been useful. With Daniel, I was wanted. Life didn't transform overnight into some glossy montage of perfection. It didn't need to. The changes were subtle, but cumulative. Mornings felt lighter. Decisions felt like mine again. I stopped second-guessing my tone, my ambition, my needs. At work, I took a promotion I'd once hesitated to accept because Wesley thought it would make me too intense. My career flourished without anyone resenting my success. Occasionally, news of Wesley drifted back to me in fragments. He moved out of town for a while, then moved back, switched jobs, complained about dating apps. According to mutual acquaintances, he talked about me the way people talk about missed opportunities, always framed as something that had slipped through his fingers rather than something he had thrown away. He never reached out again, not directly. I think part of him understood that there was no version of the past he could rewrite where I'd accept being second choice ever again. One evening, months later, I found an old photo while cleaning out my phone. Wesley and me on my couch, his arm around my shoulders, both of us smiling for the camera. I studied my own face in the image. I looked tired, smaller somehow, like I was folding myself inward to make room for someone else's unresolved history. I deleted the photo without hesitation. That night, sitting on the same couch with Daniel beside me, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, certainty. Not about the future being perfect, but about my place in it. I wasn't competing with ghosts anymore. I wasn't auditioning for love or proving my worth through stability and sacrifice. I had learned the hardest lesson of all: being chosen means nothing if you don't choose yourself first. Wesley had told me in front of his parents exactly who he was and where I stood. For once, I believed him. And believing him saved me years of waiting in a room I was never meant to stay in. Some people mistake peace for boredom because chaos is the only intensity they know. I used to think that way too. Now I know better. Peace isn't empty. It's spacious. It gives you room to grow, to breathe, to become someone you actually recognize when you look in the mirror. I wasn't the safe option. I was the wrong woman for a man who didn't know how to value stability until it was gone.